You're listening to Beyond Boss Fights, gaming conversations with interesting people. And now, here's your host, Raxwolf.
Hello, welcome to episode 10. Have you ever thought about what it would be like to make a living in the video games industry? To take something that you're very passionate about and something that you've done for almost your entire life and make that the thing that you do to earn a living? Today my guest has done exactly that. I've got with me Joey Wiggs, who is a developer for the game company Flying Helmet Games. And we have a conversation about what he does for a living, how he got where he is, some of the lessons he's learned along the way, and what being a game developer means for having a hobby of playing video games. But before we get too far into that conversation, I did want to introduce a new segment today. I'm going to try and break the ice with a little bit of a lighthearted conversation with one of my kids. I'm going to do a segment called What the Kids Are Playing, because sometimes the interests of the kids are a little bit different than what my interests are when it comes to video games, and I was interested to see what it is the kids are attracted to and what they like in video games and what the trends are for the younger generation in playing games. So first I'm going to introduce my son Broadkill. That's not his real name. And after that we'll jump right into the interview with Joey. Broadkill, welcome to the podcast for the first time.
Well, hello, I'm Broadkill.
Broadkill, we're doing a segment called What Are the Kids Playing? And what we're basically going to do is talk through one of the games that you're playing, because you guys play different games than I do sometimes. Sometimes you play the same games, but in a lot of cases there are games that I am not into or not as interested in, and I'm going to have you kind of explain them to me and to the listeners, and also we'll just talk a little bit about them. So what game have you decided to talk about today?
I decided to talk about Kerbal Space Program.
Kerbal Space Program, okay. So, Kerbal Space Program, I'm actually kind of familiar with this one because I played it a couple times too. Could you explain what Kerbal Space Program is all about, basically, in, 50 words or less?
In Kerbal Space Program, you build a rocket and try to send your guy into space.
Okay, that was certainly less than 50 words. So what's most appealing about this game to you?
Well, I've always kind of wanted to design something and it not looked bad. So Legos, when I play with Legos, I don't usually make a very good thing. My things are always like too boxy or something. But on Kerbal Space Program, there's already parts. You just have to put them together.
Cool. So do you find it to be a difficult game?
No, I don't really think it's difficult. It's just kind of stressful if your rocket doesn't make it and you want your guy not to die.
You actually launched little Kerbals, little alien Kerbals into space in your in the rockets that you build, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever successfully gotten into space?
Yes, I have, but it was kind of like Yuri Gagarin's flight. No, Alan Shepard's flight. I went up. I went really high up. I went even farther high up, and then I went down.
You never got quite into orbit?
I couldn't orbit it.
So what's your next goal for Kerbal Space Program? What's the next thing you want to accomplish?
Find a good fuselage tank that I can put onto one of my rockets that's not too big, not too small. It's just the perfect size, and I can send my guy around into orbit, maybe someday to the moon.
What's your favorite part about the game?
I like it that the Kerbals, I mean, this seems like a weird thing to be my favorite part, but I like it that the Kerbals, when you launch the shuttle, it's got a little picture of the Kerbal. And depending on the stupidity levels, they will show different emotions. And it's kind of funny.
So you can watch their faces as they're blasting off and possibly even crashing back down to Earth.
Oh.
If you could change one thing about the game, what would it be?
I would change what the Kerbals looked like, probably.
Why is that?
Well, all their heads are kind of tall and skinny, and it's kind of weird. and their hair is just like the very, very top of their heads. And
Would you recommend this game to somebody else, and how come?
it depends on who the person is, because some people think that stuff is boring, but some people think that stuff is exciting. If there's one person that wants to build something and launch it, then I would recommend the game to them.
It sounds like a good plan. Thank you for being with us on the show today, Broadkill. We appreciate your taking your time out of your busy life to appear on your father's podcast.
You're welcome.
So today we're joined by Joey. Hello, Joey. Thanks for being here today.
Hi, Brax. Thanks for having me.
And we're going to have a pretty good conversation later on about going into indie development, indie game development. But as we normally do, I like to introduce our guest by allowing him or her to go over their definitive gaming history, just so you know where they're coming from. And I'm going to do no different here, Joey. Could you go ahead and kind of run down your definitive gaming history for the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been gaming pretty much most of my life. My parents had, like, when I was 3, we had an Atari. I don't remember what kind because I didn't actually play it as a 3-year-old. Instead, I just ruined it by shoving a $20 bill in the game slot because I saw them putting games in it. That's what I figured I would do, and it didn't actually work. They were mad at me for that. But my first actual real sort of gaming experience would have been 4 or 5-ish with the Nintendo Entertainment System. Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, all that jazz. Later on, getting into, like, my first RPG was the Dragon Warrior series, Dragon Quest now, but moving on to, like, the Super Nintendo with the Final Fantasy series, more Super Mario, like lots of platformers. My family didn't own a computer until I was in grade 6 or 7. Ye old IBM Aptiva Pentium 90.
All right.
Which was exciting. I'm pretty sure it set my parents back a lot of money at the time. But at that point, starting to get into computer games, PC games, including like Warcraft, the original RTS, Diablo. First MMO I really ever played was The Realm Online, the second graphical MMO to ever exist. I think Meridian 59 was the first one, which I didn't play that, and they were only like a month apart as far as release dates. But so yeah, I pretty much grew up doing both console gaming and then eventually in junior high, like moving on to primarily PC gaming, but still doing a lot of console gaming because I loved my JRPGs. Because we ended up getting an N64 for a bit, but really that generation, my primary gaming console was the PlayStation because it had all the Final Fantasy games on it. It had the Tales of series on it. Played some great RPGs, some not so great RPGs. Final Fantasy Tactics is a great one. Tactics Ogre. And then, getting into high school, we played lots of GoldenEye, lots of StarCraft. Trying to think what else. Diablo 2. So, Blizzard fanboy house there, because my father played a lot of games too, which was pretty cool.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah, he was he was right there with me playing. He never played any MMOs, but he loves Diablo, which reminds me to purchase him Diablo 3 on the console for Christmas at some time. Except now that I've ruined it, he'll hear this and whatever.
Did you play any tabletop games, or was it strictly video games?
No, actually, that is an excellent question. I did a fair bit of board gaming as a child. I do a lot of board gaming now as an adult. In junior high, I started doing pen and paper role-playing games, so D&D 2nd Edition, Rifts, Palladium. Played like one game of Vampire the Masquerade. That was awful. I know I'm going to get raked over the coals for that one. I don't think we knew what to do with the system. And then in high school, I actually started developing my own homebrew system that we called Crithania, which, funnily enough, is the sort of the basis progenitor of our game Eon Altar. It's completely evolved well beyond anything I ever did in high school. But it's interesting that our game has those roots in what we did in high school.
Very cool. Yeah, we're going to get into Eon Alter a little bit later too.
Yeah, and today, like, I have a D&D 4th edition campaign that's been running for 3 years with some friends of mine. This weekend, we're actually starting a 5th edition D&D campaign where I get to play. I haven't been a player in a pen and paper role-playing game for a few years, actually. I normally am the DM, so it's going to be nice to not have to worry about a bajillion things and actually just play.
Yeah, exactly. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about you becoming an indie game developer today, but you didn't start out in game development, did you?
No, I didn't. I actually, fresh out of university, started in application development rather than game development. Actually, my first job was at a Canadian company called Intuit Canada. I was doing tax software, but that was only for like 11 months. And then I moved on to Microsoft. For me, the application development was largely my foot in the door. The video games industry is extremely competitive. You got a bajillion kids coming out of university who are willing to work for peanuts 80 hours a week, and it's still a problem today, where you're competing with that kind of stuff. And if you want to have any sort of life outside, it's very difficult to get in the industry and not be a hulking mess of whatever after the industry's done with you. Today, I have a better option with that because I have experience in an industry. I have lots of programming experience, etc., which allows me to set myself apart from all of those crazy kids who are like clamoring to get into the video game industry for absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm. Now, was it always the plan to get some experience at a big company and then go to a smaller thing, or were you hoping to perhaps get into the game side of Microsoft when you were there?
I think the latter is closer to what I wanted rather than what actually happened. Getting into Microsoft was a huge opportunity because I'm from Canada, and we don't get paid nearly as much in Canada for the same sort of things that we would in the US as a developer, etc. So, and then being able to put a name like Microsoft on my resume was a massive opportunity. So from that perspective, it was pretty important for myself to be able to get into Microsoft and get that experience. I was hoping that, you could move around inside Microsoft, and you can, but I have a bad habit of just sort of letting life take me where it goes. And I'll be honest, I haven't really had to search for jobs per se. They've just, opportunities have landed in my lap. Now, my skill set allows me to obtain those opportunities, but actually, like, having the opportunities present themselves has not been anything that I've done actively, for better or for worse.
Well, that's good. Now, what was the thing that made you decide to eventually leave the security of a large company like Microsoft for the rather unsure industry of not only video games, but also a startup video game company?
Two factors really on that. The first factor is I was starting to feel a little bit of fatigue doing application development day in, day out. I mean, I liked what I did. It was actually quite interesting, extremely difficult problems. For those who aren't aware, like one of the last things I did at Microsoft is I was working in File I/O and Office, and I was partially responsible for how Office and OneDrive interact on your desktop machine. So when you double-click a file in your OneDrive account and it opens up in Word and it hooks up to the internet, that's code that I helped write. Hooray, that's cool.
I love that integration, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
But at the same time, I just turned 31 in April, and I don't have a spouse or anything yet, and I don't have a house or any bills or whatever, or I'd paid off all student loans. So I was in a position where I'm like, I want to, at some point in my life, I have to go do this. Like, I have to go see what it's like. I want to go do this. I want to I hear awesome things from people, big risk, big reward, right? You go to a startup and, maybe it'll flop, maybe it'll be awesome. But I'm at a point in my life where my financials are stable. I'm not getting any younger, so let's go try this out. And then the Eon Alter thing just sort of, again, landed in my lap. My friend Ed Douglas, I went to high school with him, actually. He's one of the founders of the Flying Helmet Games company. And he was like, hey, do you want to come program for us? And I was like, yes.
And it sounded like this was something that you had, and I don't know if it was in the back of your mind or in the front of your mind the whole time. What actually influenced you to be interested in game development? Was it just because you were always a fan of playing games in the past?
Yeah, that's part of it. So the one of the things is that I actually went to university. My degree is comp sci with a concentration in video games design. So right from, I think, halfway through, not elementary school, like grade 7 or 8 or so, at that point I was like, I want to go be a games programmer. I want to do this because this is cool, because the ability to create a game that people can enjoy, that people are having fun with, like, I was having so much fun with video games, and I thought it would be great if I could help other people experience that. And it would be so much fun. So throughout high school, etc., I started doing my own like programming projects on the side, etc. And then university, I actually got a degree, a full university, like 4-year Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, but it just happened to have a concentration in video games design because the University of Calgary offers that, which was really cool. It's sort of mostly, for most of my life, been in the back of my mind that, hey, I want to go do this. But then, as mentioned before, the realities of being able to get your foot in the door after I graduated university, like I had, $40,000 in student loans, et cetera, which I know to U.S. folks is nothing, but in Canada it was a lot. And so going into application development to get my foot in the door in some industry where I would actually, my time would be valued, was really exciting onto its own. But eventually, like I said, I wanted to get into making video games. That's been a passion of mine for decades, literally.
Well, now that you've quote unquote made it, you've become a game developer, and you're working for an independent studio. This has always been something that I've been interested in, being that I will never be a video game developer, but I'm mostly a consumer of the games. Does being a dev enhance or detract from your ability to enjoy playing the games? And not just your games, but any game.
That's a really good question. Actually, there was an article recently on Gama Sutra, I believe, that was a developer talking about this exact same issue. For me, though, I mean, I'll be honest, I've only been a games developer, like, literal in the most literal sense, for 3 months now. So it's still brand new to me. So, I mean, ask me again in a year and we'll see what I find. But for now, I haven't been finding myself playing games any differently than I did before. But to be fair, even when I was growing up, the first thing I often think about when I'm playing games is like, oh, how would they have programmed this, or how would they have designed this? I mean, you've seen my blog at gamerbydesign.blogspot.com. And I mean, I'm breaking down game mechanics all the time. So I don't foresee myself stopping that. I mean, maybe programming a game day in, day out will change my viewpoint on that. But so far it hasn't.
Could you describe for me that moment when it finally hit you? Wow, I'm no longer an employee of the largest software company in the world. I am now an indie developer. What was that like in your mind?
I'm not sure that moment's happened yet. I quit Microsoft in May of this year and took a month and a half off, and then I started in with Flying Helmet Games. And I mean, during that month and a half off, it was professional development, me getting up to speed on things like Unity and whatnot to prepare for my new job. I mean, it's hit me that I don't work for the biggest software company in the world anymore, but I think I was ready to move on to other things anyway, so that wasn't a big deal one way or the other. But for the indie game thing, like it feels like a programming job. I go in, I figure out what I need to do for the day, I program it, and I mean, it's different because the tools are slightly different from Microsoft, etc., but it still just feels like a job. I mean, I'm really enjoying the job, but it still feels like a job at the same time. So I'm not sure it's really hit me yet what the real differences there are.
And part of the reason I ask that question is because I work for a large enterprise myself, and it's great. There's a lot of great things about working for a big company, but sometimes you go, I got into this job for the technical piece in my case, and it's 85% process and procedures, in a big company.
Yes. Yes. Actually, it's funny that you say that, because it's something that I've been I don't know, struggling with is the right term, but it's something that I've noticed. Because when I was at Microsoft, it was very much, I didn't do that much coding per se. Like it would maybe be one day out of my week that like 20% of my time would actually be spent coding, and the other 80% would be, helping other people or going through procedures for checking in code reviews, etc. And to be fair, all of that rigmarole, all of that bureaucracy, I guess, is a term for it, but I'm not sure it's a good term for it because all of it's evolved for very good reasons, right? You've got when you've got a company of that size, like Office, you're talking like 50 teams of 60 people each, or like 3,000 people, and 2/3 of them are checking into the same code base. That's insane. How do you make sure like everything's not broken all the time? Whereas right now for Flying Helmet Games, we have about 15 employees, and I think 6 or 7 of us are checking stuff in. Like, we only have 3 actual developers, and the rest are designers and artists. And so we don't, like, we're still stepping on each other's toes, but there's not nearly as much process. Sometimes I wish there was more process because we do step on each other's toes on occasion, and we're still trying to figure some of that stuff out too, right? So the difference between the small company and the big company as far as processes go, it's a bit liberating not to have to worry about a bajillion things every time I want to make a change. But at the same time, having that sort of guidance was helpful because now I don't have that guidance, and we're kind of making it up as we go along in certain senses based on each individual person's previous experiences, and we're still trying to hash all that out.
Knew exactly what you needed to do before because they'd been doing it for the last 20, 30 years.
Bingo.
So for your job now, I've seen you post pictures on Twitter and stuff, or I'm working from my home today, or I'm working from the cafe downstairs, or wherever you may have been. Could you kind of walk us through a day in the life of a typical day in the life of an indie game developer?
Sure. For me, it's a bit different because I'm working remotely. I'm working based out of Seattle, whereas the grand majority of the team is based in Vancouver, BC. So I'm not in their office, so I work from home. And for me, most of it is get up, roll out of bed, and do my morning things, and then go to my computer and be online for like 10:15, 10:30 for our stand-up meeting, and we do video chat for that, which is actually super neat because it gives me a lot more, the people on the other side are people, and I'm a person to them rather than just some jerk on email saying you broke the build again. Mm-hmm. And figure out, what do I need to do for the day? We use a variant of agile processes, which means, we have 1 to 2 week chunks of time called sprints where we're like, all right, these are all the different things we need to do. And so prioritize them, figure out how long it's going to take, figure out what you need to do and do them. And then so on a day-to-day basis, I figure out, all right, what task am I on today? And then I go do it. And so for me, a lot of it is just sitting down at my computer and doing whatever tasks that I need done for the day. Working from home, however, with a laptop and all that does give me the liberty to, go to a cafe, or when they were replacing the tiles outside my front door and I was basically being fumigated out of my own home, go find somewhere else to work for a bit. And it's liberating from a sense. It also drives me up the wall a little bit because I'm kind of a chatty person, and I like having that sort of people to talk to. And so working by myself in my house day in, day out for 8-9 hours a day drives me a bit batty. So anytime I can sort of get out of my house and, hang out with friends, etc., is a good thing. And, there'll be occasions where I just I need to get out, and it'll be like 2 p.m. and I'll be like, sorry guys, I need out. I'll be back later. And so there's that aspect of it.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the challenges that you face working remotely, because I know that, a lot of us who work at a big company have to go into cube world every day, or I don't know, in my case now it's collaborative workspace world. Some of us kind of think every once in a while, boy, it sure would be nice to not have to make this drive, and I could just roll out of bed and there I'd be. When I was done working, I'd be home already, that type of thing. But I know there's other challenges besides just the social challenges. Isn't there some difficulty in kind of staying connected with the team when you're on your own like that?
Yep, absolutely. It's funny because I'm not before working for Flying Helmet Games, I wasn't any stranger to working with remote teams. When I was working at Microsoft, we had a sister team out in Boston, where I actually got to fly out to meet them once, which was really cool. But and now I'm on the other side, being the remote person for Flying Helmet Games. But that's why I mentioned the video chat, right? Is it's very easy to forget when you're on one side of the equation versus the other. Like if you're not at the mothership, so to speak, it's very easy to forget that the folks who are remote are actual people, and textual communication, we use a lot of IM, and textual communication often misses a lot of nuance. And so it's very easy to be like, get an email from somebody and you see like 3 paragraphs of them explaining like this technical thing, and it's very easy to accidentally read into it that they're angry, or very easy to say like, oh, wow, they're super business-like, they're kind of jerks. And then when you actually meet them in person, or for the first time, or even for the second or third time, and you realize, oh, hey, you know what, this is their demeanor, and now I have more context to like those communications, and you know what, they weren't actually being jerks. I was just missing that context at the time, and all sorts of stuff like that can really help make or break how your team interacts, because as a remote person, it's sometimes very difficult for me to remember that, like, hey, they're not trying to be jerks on the other end. They are also people who are trying to do their job. And, sometimes you just forget that. It's the same sort of thing where you're playing with an MMO, and a lot of people often forget, like, hey, you know what, there's real people on the other side of that text message, or on the other side of on the other keyboard. It's the greater internet theory, the anonymity plus audience equals complete blah, right?
Yeah.
And I find anonymity isn't even really a requirement for that. Sometimes it's just you don't have that eye-to-eye contact, and that by itself actually makes a big difference, I find.
Mm-hmm. So with only 15 or so people in the company, I assume that all of you probably fill multiple roles. Are you involved in some of the feedback into the strategy of where the game's going, or is it strictly, we're going to tell you what we need done and you're going to code it and send it back?
Right now, it's kind of like strictly, here's what you need to do, and I code it and hand it back. But a large part of that has been the things that I've been working on have been pretty mechanical, so to speak. A lot of the stuff I've been working on have been cameras and networking, etc. So it's not a lot to do with design. I've done some combat work, and in the case of where I did the combat work, there was a bit of back and forth where I'd be like, you know what, the way you describe this in the design document doesn't really make sense. Maybe we should try this instead. And there's a bit of collaboration back and forth. But we do have a couple of folks designing like our combat system, etc., who have the grandiose vision that they are putting down on paper. And I find that's okay for me, because too many cooks in the kitchen can ruin something. I don't really want to design combat by committee. That would kind of suck. But at the same time, I do have avenues for feedback, and I do exercise them on occasion. But for the most part, right now, it's just go code this, and I'm like, all right, I'll go code that. That sounds good.
So we touched on this a little bit earlier, some of the things anyway, but I'm going to ask the question anyway, because there might be more to it. What kind of things did you learn at Microsoft that has been beneficial to working at a small startup?
So yeah, a lot of things actually, because one of those things that I think a lot of people say and never really realize that it's super true is that university doesn't prepare you for the real world at all.
Right.
Like, it prepared me in terms of, like, I know tons about mathematics. I know lots about, like, high-level programming things. Like, I know about thread barriers and thread synchronization and operating systems and all these things, which have been useful in my jobs, I should say. And I would probably not be nearly as good a developer as I would be today if not for that. But a lot of what was missing was how to be a developer, like, you know, how to deal with things like code repositories and like code reviews and checking in code and dealing with your coworkers. And, you know, there's lots of group projects in my university, but they were a completely different feel from actually working with coworkers in the real world, because the coworkers in the real world are often way more invested in trying to get stuff done and getting it done right, rather than the folks that, you know, you went to university with, which it might be a 50-50 chance whether they care at all. And the other thing is, like, if you don't do your job at university and you're in a group, the group suffers. If you don't do your job and you're at a job, you get fired, and everybody else is like, all right, we'll pick up the pieces now, have fun. So with Microsoft, I learned a lot about, you know, good engineering techniques, code reviews, being able to sit down with people who are more senior than I am and watch them do things like debug things or design certain features, etc., has been invaluable in terms of learning. Like, just being able to watch them do their job, absolutely amazing. I've learned so much stuff from that. And yeah, like I mentioned, the being able to learn processes around developing a product, being able to say, all right, let's weigh this from a developer perspective versus a user perspective. How expensive is this going to be for us to implement? Understanding things like being able to, how do you make it easier for you to debug this problem in the future or debug this stuff? Because that can be a huge amount of your time. If you've designed something that is as clever as you can possibly be, how are you ever going to fix it if something goes wrong, right? Processes and just actually working in the real world, Microsoft was a huge boon, especially since, I mean, a lot of people make fun of Microsoft for being completely out of touch. But I find that from engineering perspective, a developer perspective, some of the processes, et cetera, are top notch, and learning how they do things and understanding why they do some of the things that they do has been invaluable.
Well, they got to be doing something right.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, sure, you got the jokes where it's like wait for V3, it'll be awesome, or like they have no idea what they're doing, blah, 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 Windows 8, blah, 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 and or people complaining about the ribbon and things like that. And, you know, I understand that people hate change, and that's fine. But the way they got to figure out, like, hey, some of the stuff, like being able to do user studies, et cetera, and figure out, you know what, this is objectively a better way to do things, and learning how they go about that stuff was also really interesting.
Well, like you said before, there are just so many hands in the honeypot there. It's really amazing that they're ever able to deliver a cohesive operating system or application or anything, as many people are as working on one thing at a time.
Yes, actually, it's interesting because I find that that's one of the benefits to being in a smaller company, is that the cadence that you're able to work at is much, much higher. A big company like Microsoft, you know, it takes 3 years to put out a new version of Office, and how many of the, like, you're talking like 100 man years worth of work, but the amount of, like, 100 man years, of like time developing features, and then thousands of man hours trying to integrate all those features and stuff. Like, the amount of time you spend like coding new stuff is very small in respect to those 3 years, and it's for good reason. Again, like, you've got 3,000 people all partying on the same code base and all have to make sure everything works. And then for a small team where you've only got 15, you can spend so much more time building new code and faster stuff because there's fewer hands in that pot, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to kind of weigh in, because one of the things I learned working for a large company isn't even technical. It's not even procedural. It's just kind of, I don't know, maybe it's the wisdom of age, or maybe it's because technology has changed since I first started at this company. But I know when I first started, email was actually kind of new. I mean, it wasn't brand new, but it was a few years old, and it was certainly pretty new for businesses. I'd been using it in college for a while, so I understood it. But there was a tendency for me at that age to want to respond to everything. I wanted to have an answer for just everything that came into my inbox, and I would answer it as quickly as I could. One of the things I've learned over the years is that there's a time to be quiet. And sometimes if you see something and you're maybe not quite sure, or even if you know the answer, sometimes if you give it 6 hours, you give it 24 hours, you come back and everything's calmed down and the problem's been solved and you didn't have to add any confusion to it. So it's just kind of interesting that that's the one thing being in a large company that I've learned, is that there's a time to speak and there's a time to be quiet. And sometimes you just add more confusion to the mix when you have to speak up about everything, because people don't understand what you're talking about. They ask follow-up questions. It goes off in a different direction, And so sometimes the best thing is to just wait.
I am completely guilty of not waiting. I am bad at waiting. It helped in terms of at Microsoft. I was the go-to guy, right? I demonstrated that if I didn't know what it was, I knew who to talk to get to it. So everybody would come to me for those sort of things. I'm very bad at waiting. So I'm pretty sure I've contributed my fair amount of confusion to my coworkers as well.
Kind of a topical question for you, because this actually broke since I came up with the show notes and I added it later. This week we got news that a one-time startup game company, Mojang, the creator of Minecraft, was purchased by Microsoft for $2.5 billion. So first of all, I just wanted to kind of pause there and let that sink in, because this is a startup that, kind of like your company, started very small. I think it even started with one guy.
Yeah, just one.
So
Notch.
Here's Notch coding this little thing that he wants to do. Fast forward 5-6 years, $2.5 billion in the bank. What are your thoughts on that?
That is an unfathomably large amount of money. I could not even imagine having anywhere near that much money.
So the second part to that question is kind of more along the indie development lines, because I wonder, this is a guy who for the longest time said, I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to buck the system. I don't care what else is out there. And then in what seems like a 180, he sells his company to the biggest software company in the world once again. So my question is it even possible for a successful indie studio to remain independent, or is the allure of that huge payoff just too difficult to walk away from?
I think it depends on the scenario. If you're working by yourself and you have nobody else accountable to you, I think, you could remain independent and say, nope, you can't do that. And you can't buy me out. That's fine. This is totally my thing. Go away. And I think it's very easy to say that as somebody who doesn't have anybody working for you. But in the case that in Notch's case, he wasn't really involved in Minecraft anymore. He had a whole bunch of people who have families relying on him, etc. And he wasn't invested in the company anymore. So for him to just sell it and walk away, I think was probably the correct decision, because the folks who are working for creating Minecraft right now, they can be like, hooray, look at us. We have a big company backing us. I mean, they already had tons of money, so that wasn't really a huge issue, but now they have more money. They can be secure in their jobs, etc. Versus Notch, who, he just wants to go make his own thing now. And be that indie developer again, so to speak. And he has he can go do that now because he is no longer tethered to Mojang. I think it's a certain amount of fiscal responsibility to the folks that are working with you, that if you have this opportunity, and you probably want to talk to the rest of your employees if you're a pretty small company about how they feel about it.
So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask at this point, since I've got you on the line. Do you think this is a good thing or a bad thing for Minecraft? There's a lot of people out there that are worried that Microsoft is going to ruin Minecraft, but there's also things that Microsoft could do for Minecraft. What do you think?
Whole former employer thing, right? Microsoft has a tendency to not be hands-off on the things that it's bought. Bungie comes to mind as one who ended up managing to get themselves spun off because they were not as happy as they could have been in the scenario. Rare, they bought and have their hands in, and Rare's done good things, so that's been a good thing for Rare, considering they were pretty much close to being shuttered when they got bought out from Microsoft, if I remember my video game history correctly. I think it could go either way still. I have zero insight as to what Microsoft is planning on doing with Microsoft. It happened way after I left, and even if I had insight, I wouldn't be able to say it. But I don't know. I mean, maybe they bought it just because they were like, oh, you know, the Minecraft's big with the kids today. Let's get some cachet and go buy the cool thing. Or maybe they're doing it because it's on like every platform and they can, like Android, monetize other platforms, which isn't necessarily a bad strategy when you're no longer the incumbent, right? So there's a bunch of reasons why they could have. I don't know if what they're going to throw at it, if they're going to throw anything at it, if they're just going to leave it, no idea. From the Minecraft term, I think it's at this point a cultural standby, and I think with the way that they've developed it, like Java, and you can go backwards versions, etc., I think it'll probably be okay. There'll be some people who are like, oh man, the man just bought this game. It's like, IBM in the day, right? Oh, the man, I hate the man, stick it to the man. And there'll be people who do that. You'll never convince them otherwise. It's not worth the time to try. That's fine. I don't think it's a big enough part of the I don't think most of the population that plays Minecraft cares at all who owns Minecraft. Like, adults, kids, etc. Like, they're just playing it because it's fun. And as long as the fun doesn't stop, they won't stop playing it. And I think that's the most important part.
So let's talk about your game. Let's talk about what, is it Flying Helmet Games?
Flying Helmet Games is the company. Eon Altar is the name of the game.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Eon Altar, because I did a little research on you when I decided to have you on, or asked you to come on, and you graciously accepted. And I went and looked at the teaser trailer for Eon Altar. That game looks incredible. That teaser trailer is really very, very cool, and it's something that I've never seen before. Could you go ahead and explain what it is?
Yes. So the idea behind Eon Altar is it's basically a sort of tabletop RPG in video game form. And if you're looking at the teaser trailer, the idea is that you have sort of a central device. In the teaser trailer, it's an iPad. We're looking at more things like couch modes where you could use your TV or your PC rather than a touch device as your central thing where everybody's playing on it, largely because giant touchscreens have not really materialized as a thing in most consumers' living rooms. But also, it's really uncomfortable to be hunched over a tablet for like an hour. So you have a central device, and you're all playing your game. You're playing the game as a group, and you have your handheld device, which might be smartphones or tablets, etc., whatever. And on your smartphone, you're controlling your character on the screen. You also can look up your character. Like it's a tabletop style RPG, right? So you have stats, you have skills trees that you can purchase stuff out of. You have shopping. You go buy a sword and equip it, etc. Go read more about the lore about the world, etc. And you have all this on your device, and that device is hooked up with your game on the screen, and there's that interaction there. But the other important thing is that, as the teaser trailer actually tells you, the philosophy behind it is that for video games, multiplayer often means being in disparate places, flung across the country or even across the world. And there's been a huge resurgence lately of people who, they like for board games and D&D tabletop RPGs, it's fun to be in the same room and hanging out with your friends and eating pizza and beer. And when your friend does a jerk move, you lean over and you punch them on the shoulder and say, hey, whatever, or, give yourselves high fives when you do something cool, and having that local interaction. You play Mario Kart on the N64 back in the day or GoldenEye, and that was the exact sort of thing that happened. And I think with board gaming and with tabletop RPGs having such a huge resurgence, people want to tap back into that feeling and that sort of style of play. And there's not a lot of video games today that do that. Nintendo has traditionally monopoly on that, right? Where, they always had those super cool local multiplayer games, Smash Brothers, which is coming out soon, that sort of thing. And there's not a lot of people making games like that anymore. So, I mean, we're hoping that's a niche that resonates with people, because it really resonates with us.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point you make about the center device. Let me just explain really quickly what I saw in the teaser trailer. You can tell me if I'm wrong or right. What I saw was everybody brings their mobile device, which I think I saw an infographic today that 90% of adults in the U.S. have a smartphone, or was it a cell phone? Whatever it was a lot of mobile devices out there.
Lots of mobile devices.
So everybody pulls out this device that they've already got. They've got a part of the game on their mobile device. Mm-hmm. They control their character through the game or the dungeon or whatever it is you're running with your friends from their mobile device. And then there's certain aspects of the group part of the game that happen on the device in the center, which is, like you said, is a touch screen, a tablet in the teaser trailer, but you're working on some other things. Is that about how it works?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And of course, the whiz bang thing on the teaser trailer is that you've got the dice on your mobile device, and when you flick it, the dice roll off onto the center device.
I am sad to say that whiz bang aspect is not in our design anymore.
Okay, well that was one that really got me.
It was super cool, like the idea of being able to just shake your dice on your screen and then throw it onto the main thing. That's really showing you that the two devices are super connected. That's a really neat, as you say, whiz bang moment. But I don't think that after we did it, I wasn't part of the company when they did that prototype. Because the teaser trailer is a prototype that they built to help shop the game around, etc. And some of the design decisions that were made in the prototype have changed since, like the ability to have a sort of a couch mode where the central device is not a touchscreen. We still have that sort of whiz bang moment, so to speak, though, because in the original design, you'll notice that nobody's controlling their character using their handset. Their handset is literally for dialogue options and character sheet. And the only thing they were doing with the central tablet was they were dragging their characters around to move them. Whereas now we're actually putting character movement. If you have a touchscreen, you can still do that. But now your handset is the controller as well. So you sort of have that whiz bang moment where you're on your cell phone and you can move your character around on the screen with your cell phone. So it's not quite as flashy as rolling dice that fall onto the screen. And to be fair, there have been a couple of games out there, if I recall correctly, that have taken that idea and run with it. I don't remember what games off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure I saw a demo where somebody else had done exactly the same thing when I was at PAX. So I was like, oh, okay, that's cool.
So you talked a little bit about the reason for the teaser trailer originally. Now, the game started as a Kickstarter. Now, why was that funding avenue abandoned, and what has changed philosophically since then?
Right. So the sort of the timeline for how all this went down was Scott Penner, Luke Reynolds, and Ed Douglas, the founders of the company. They started out and they said, all right, let's take this role-playing game that we've tabletop board game thing, Crythania, that they'd been building up over time, from starting with what I had built in high school, and like 10 years later, it's evolved completely differently. But they were like, you know what? Let's go make a video game out of this, because it's pretty awesome. We think we could make it cool. And so they built a prototype. They got some people on board to help build the prototype, which is what you see in the teaser trailers. They started shopping the prototype around to places like they were at PAX East, not this year, but the previous year. They went to Gen Con. They were at GDC and Intel Developers Conference. They shopped it around a bit. They got some funding, but they couldn't get enough funding. So they turned to Kickstarter to try to get some more funding. And they put it up, and there was sort of, I think, a sticker shock value for it, because one of the things you'll find on Kickstarter indie games is they often do not make anywhere near enough money to actually ship a game. You hear about indie games that they make $30,000, and it's like, all right, you have $30,000 to make a game. And when you start thinking about, all right, well, you need to spend, like, if you're paying somebody who's making a whopping $40,000 a year, you're giving them like $3,000 a month. And if you have 10 people, that's 30 grand gone in a month. Like, that's it. Gone, right? So 30 grand is not much. So they had put up, I think, 300 grand. And I think there was a sticker shock value on that for people. And they were like, that's way too much money, whatever. And I don't think it was quite advertised as heavily as it could have been, should have been. So they actually abandoned the Kickstarter about like 10 days in or something like that, because there's a bunch of studies done that says if you don't make a certain percentage within like your first 3 days, your chances of actually hitting your goal is like less than 1% or whatever. There's a whole bunch of metrics out there that you can look up for that sort of thing. And so they were going to be nowhere near hitting their goal. So instead of limping it out and having bad press that goes with limping it out, they decided to abandon the Kickstarter and look for other ways of funding the game, which we clearly have, but I can't talk about how they got that funding or what they did. Sure. But we do have funding. We are getting paid some money for doing what we do, which is fantastic.
Can you talk about when you expect the game to be available?
We're aiming sometime in the completely specific time period of the first half of 2015. We don't really have a better public figure than that, unfortunately, but soonish.
Okay, we'll look forward to seeing the press release.
I am looking forward to seeing the press release as well.
Okay, I guess the last question, kind of going back to your movement into an indie developer from a large company, which is the most fascinating aspect for me, being that I work at a large company. Would you do it all over again, or would you do some things differently?
Again, I'm still pretty new at this, so, ask me again in a year, but right now, yes, I would totally do it again. I think in terms of the longer time period working at a large company like Microsoft, it was the right decision. I gained so much knowledge out of it, so I did some super cool things with them, made a lot of excellent professional contacts, learned massive amounts. I do not regret my time at Microsoft at all. I would do it again. Jumping ship to go to a small indie company, I think, again, right decision for me where I am in my life, as well as what I want to do. And so, yep, I would do it all again, and I'm not one for regrets, so I probably wouldn't even alter anything. I would just, jump in, do it.
I just wanted to give a couple of really quick updates for this month. First of all, if you listened to last month's episode about when a gaming community dies, I had on the program Andrew from Late Night Steamer. Something that happened after that episode was actually pretty cool. Andrew, in his story, mentioned some of his co-presenters, co-partners with Late Night Steamer, and one of the main guys that was involved in that story was Scott Viper, who was kind of a co-founder of the podcast and was instrumental in partnering with Andrew to continue the Late Night Steamer podcast, and had several parts within the story that he actually wanted to clarify. So what Scott did was, after he listened to Beyond Bossfights, he posted a YouTube response, which was about 30 minutes long, kind of telling his side of the story. Nothing, this was not a big controversy or anything. It was just kind of this is my angle to what was said on the podcast, and I just wanted to make sure everybody kind of heard both sides of it. The sides weren't necessarily opposing. They were really more complimentary. But I thought that was really neat that conversation continued, and I would highly suggest that you check out the link in the show notes, especially if you listened to last month's podcast that interviewed Andrew on his side of the Late Night Steamer rise and fall, as you were. The other thing I wanted to update on was Extra Life. Most of you know that I'm participating in Extra Life this year, and on the last show I talked about doing some kind of a raffle, and I wanted to give a little bit more detail around that for my donors. So if you want to donate to My Extra Life, first of all, the URL is extra-life.org/participant/Braxwolf. Click on the Support Me button and donate away if you'd like. So as far as the raffles go, I have the raffles all figured out now, and I'm going to have certain games raffle off at the end of the Extra Life drive, so after October 25th, after the marathon's over. And I received enough actually game donations that I'm going to have to. I originally planned to do one every $100 up to the $500 goal that I'd set, but I received enough game donations that the early levels were actually $50 apart. So I have several games unlocked in the lower levels, and I'll let you know where we are. So first of all, I have, at this point, $265, so I'm over halfway to my $500 goal, which is awesome. If you guys could help me get to 500, that would be great. If we get there early, I'll raise the goal and we'll do some more special stuff, so that's awesome. But to let you know where we are, with $50, we unlocked the Mortal Kombat Arcade Collection raffle. At $100, we unlocked The Bridge. At $150, we unlocked Scribblenauts Unlimited. At $200, we unlocked Skyrim, the base edition, which is an awesome game. So our next goal after $200, since we're sitting at $265, is $300. And if we raise $300 through donations, I will throw in a Landmark Founders Pack, the Settler Pack, for $300. And that will be unlocked and placed in the raffle. The last couple of tiers here are at $400, there is a Lego Lord of the Rings at stake, and at $500, the BioShock triple pack. So BioShock, BioShock 2, and BioShock Infinite, all three of them at $500 will be put into the raffle if we get to 500. And that was the original end goal. So we're still sitting at trying to get to $500. Two more things I wanted to let you know about. The prize for the largest single donation will be the complete Civilization 5 game and all of the extras that go along with that. So Civilization 5, the complete edition. Currently, the high is at $100. So if you'd like to secure Civilization 5, you can beat that donation and it's yours. The last thing I wanted to talk about was I received a very generous donation of Landmark beta keys from Sony Online Entertainment for this purpose, specifically for the Extra Life Drive. So what I'm doing is everybody who's donated to me to this point and has left contact information, I've sent them a 7-day beta key and a glass platform building item. I'm going to continue doing that to every donor that donates to my Extra Life until I run out of keys. So if you're interested in trying out Landmark, this would be a great opportunity to do so for a good cause. Once again, I wanted to thank everybody who's donated and anybody who's thinking about donating. It's a fantastic cause, and I really hope that we can get to the $500 goal. The other thing I guess I should mention is that since last month, I've also joined Team Lotro Players for fundraising, and many of you who follow what I do at Lotro Players will know a lot of the usual suspects that have joined that team. And that team is actually open for anybody to join. So if you go to, if you search for the Lotro Players team at extra-life.org, you can join if you want to be part of the fundraising. And if you browse the roster of the team, I think you're going to find some people that you know out there. You might see a Pine Leaf. You might come across a Draculetta. There's possibly a DJ Pimp Daddy, and you might even run across American Golden Star out there. So, Mystery also, all the folks that you guys are probably familiar with on the Lotro side of things. So come join us. Raise some funds for Extra Life. Okay, for feedback this month, I did receive a piece of feedback on iTunes, and it is from a certain individual called DJ Pimp Daddy. I don't know. That's a weird name. I don't think I'd associate with someone like that. DJ said, I listened to the first episode while multitasking at work and quickly realized I was doing this excellent show injustice. Braxwolf's topics are deep, promoting very thoughtful, long discussions about various gaming subjects. This show has content that is so engaging that I almost don't remember driving several 100-mile trips. 100-plus mile trips. Not that the show is boring, mind you. It's like reading Tolkien. Oh, I didn't even see that part before. Wow. Now I'm sorry I insulted you at the beginning, DJ. You called me like Tolkien. You just get swept up in the story and forget reality for a bit. His revolving guest list has been excellent through the first 7 episodes I have binged through, and I am excited for future shows. It's refreshing to have something in my iTunes RSS that I genuinely look forward to versus the typical sterilized commercially made gaming news and review shows. This is the first time I have felt mentally satisfied from digital entertainment since the post-Breaking Bad finale drought. During one of our trips, my wife did point out that the show does cite the MMO Lotro a lot, but all of the guests, as well as Braxwolf himself, take an objective standpoint. They also cite dozens of other games technologies, like the fantastic discussion about machinima with Pash. That guy's a content machine, by the way. Follow Pash if you don't. He's awesome. He hasn't done the Unexpected Vidcast in a while, but he's doing some other stuff now that's just as cool and creative. He's doing a YouTube audiobook series for a kid's book, like not a young adult, but a kind of a Hobbit age kid book. He goes on to say you can't fault them for using something they know and love as examples in their discussions. As for technical production value, Braxwolf puts on a fantastically polished show, devoid of all problems that plague most new podcasts, like poor Skype recordings or guests that sound like they're using a payphone on a busy NYC street. Kudos on nailing it right out of the gate, and keep up the fantastic quality. Thank you, DJ. That is really the most glowing review that I've ever had, and I think I'm going to print it out and put it on the fridge. You can send your feedback to braxwolf@gmail.com, and I'll read it on the podcast. Remember that Beyond Boss Fights is on iTunes and would appreciate your ratings and reviews. Beyond Boss Fights is also on Stitcher, so add it to your playlists. And lastly, something new this month, Beyond Boss Fights is now has a Nook and forum on anook.com. So make sure to follow us there and start a conversation of your own. That's the only place that I have a forum for this podcast. So if you have anything you want to ask me, that's a great place to start a conversation. I have one thread out there asking for any topic ideas. If anybody has any of those that they'd like me to cover, go out to anook.com and start a conversation with us. Joey, thank you once again for being here. I think it's been a really fun night to talk about your story, and I wish you the best of luck. I really would love to see you guys have a lot of success, because this is a really cool idea, and I'd love to see some different angles taken in the video gaming market.
Thanks, Brax. It was a lot of fun, and I hope that we do well as well. I'm hoping that our concepts about people playing locally really resonates with folks.
Would you like to give people your contact information? How can they follow you, get a hold of you, what have you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at TalarianJS, TalarianJS. Lots of A's in there. It's because I'm Canadian. And I have a blog, a website called Gamer by Design, which is talarian.blogspot.com. And you can check out our video game, Eon Alter, at flyinghelmetgames.com.
And as for me, you can follow me on Twitter at Braxwolf, BRAXWOLF. You can email me at braxwolf@gmail.com. I've got a Facebook page, facebook.com/Braxwolf. Also got a YouTube channel, youtube.com/user/Braxwolf. And of course, my blog is at braxwolf.com. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening, Boss Fighters. We'll see you next time.